Hi, Janil.
Hi, Tom. Hi.
Well, thank you for coming in today. We're doing this for the American Chamber podcast series on selection and human resources best practices. And I'm pleased that you were able to join us. And of course, you work for a minor corporation. You've got quite a bit of growth going on in minor right now.
Yes.
So the two topics that you're going to be helping us with today are number one on turnover. So I assume that that's of keen interest to you always, and certainly to your internal clients. And then the second thing we're going to be talking about later on is more on talent management. But I think let's start with turnover. I was interested. I was in a session earlier this morning where we were talking about data analytics and about artificial intelligence and how to use this information that we're collecting and how you can fine grain the information, go down many levels. And the thing that keeps coming back to me every time we look at this is that we get a huge amount of information, and it seems like we have a never-ending thirst for it. However, it's what we do with that information. It's what do managers actually do with it? And so that's kind of what I'd like to get, because I know you got a lot of experience in this area, and I'd like to get your thoughts and comments on what you think is effective in reducing employee turnover.
Right. Okay. So first and foremost, Tom, thanks for inviting me. It's actually my pleasure to be here, right? And when we talk of turnover, I'm an expert in it because during my career,
Are you the cause of it?
no, I've turned over a few times, right?
Okay.
I've resigned and rejoined a few times, several times. So I know both sides of it, right?
Right.
Managing it and being the one who actually turns over, right?
Right.
And to address that first one that you had when it comes to data, right? And I think data is really important, okay? Because data is a window to understanding stuff, right?
Correct.
But again, we'd have to be careful with that, particularly when it comes to turnover, because it's very easy to distill people and people turnover into just chunks of numbers.
Right.
And that is where we usually encounter the big problems with
Yeah,
turnover,
I
right?
agree.
Specifically, for example, with the reason for turnover. And we, for example, at Minor, collect reason for turnover.
Right.
But if you really, even if you do a semantic analysis, you could apply every semantic analysis to it, right? You'd still get nothing out of it.
Right.
You increase the volume, you'd still not get out of it. Because at the end of the day, there are two questions on how you got that data, right? One is the exit interview. Who was interviewing? How honest the feedback was?
Right.
Would you really get an answer that is candid, truthful, realistic, right? And therefore, it's garbage in, garbage out. So we'd have to be very, very careful with that, because sometimes we might be using a lot of systems, a lot of processes, but at the end, they contribute to 20% of the value, but the 80% is still significantly not answered right.
Yeah, I know. I mean, when I used to look at these exit interview things that came back, and reason for leaving, got a better job offer. Well, okay, what if we just hired them 3 months before?
Correct.
I mean, they took the job because they thought we were a good company, or they liked the salary or whatever else. So what changed in 3 months that would make them want to desert their position?
Correct. And to be honest with you, right, nobody in their right mind, even if they're leaving, would say, I had a problem with my manager. Or my manager was my problem, right?
Right.
I mean, maybe you'd get one in a million who would say that.
Right.
But honestly, right, particularly if you look at personality types, if you have a little bit of agreeableness in you,
Right.
you wouldn't ever say that.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
But when you look at the topic of turnover, you'd have to, whether you disagree or agree with the idea that the major problem why people leave is because of their manager. Right? If you look at the literature, if you look at research, it will always distill a big chunk of that is because of managerial effectiveness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
People, usually we join companies, but then our managers are not effective managers.
Right.
And therefore we get frustrated, we lose track of our career, and then we count as a turnover.
Right, right. Yeah, and the other thing is, I think sometimes companies get trapped into this paradigm of saying, well, we have regretted turnover and unregretted.
Yes, correct.
And I say, well, to me, all turnover is regret.
True.
It should be.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, yeah, but some people were not performing well. I said, well, then why did we hire them?
Yes.
Let's go back to the hiring process.
Correct.
How did we make a mistake? And do we view a turnover where someone, let's say they fail in their assignment, do we use that to say, hey, somehow or other we didn't see certain things in the hiring process that we should have seen?
Correct.
So how does that become feedback then to going back to our hiring process?
Right. I think you hit one of the nails on the head of turnover, right? Because usually I also manage a portion of the recruitment process, right?
Good.
So as part of my role, and usually with companies, recruitment is becoming more and more of an advertising and marketing endeavor.
Yes, I agree.
Than a correct fit,
Uh,
right? And therefore, what we're trying to do in recruitment is, because it's so hard to recruit, particularly what they say as new generation and Gen Zs, right?
Right.
We try to massage our hiring process such that we can get them in,
Yeah.
rather than with the goal of, are you a fit or are you not a fit?
Right.
And in my opinion, if we want to get that aligned, the hiring process should be a realistic preview,
Mm-hmm.
right? The hiring process should be a process that simply says, these are our expectations. This is who we are. This is the job. Are you aligned with that or not?
Right.
Because if you are not, no matter what I do, you'll be a turnover,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. That's right. I mean, I remember years ago when I was recruiting finance people, and we had finance people who everybody had to start at a manufacturing facility. They started with a typical job was a cost analyst. Now, they were a university graduate, but they, instead of coming into an office, they had to go into a plant. And when they went into a plant, they had to wear a uniform. And I can't tell you the number of people that we had who left in 6 months because they said, I didn't sign on for this. I wanted to work in an office. I wanted to use my analytical skills, and I'm coming to a plant every day. My neighbors think I got a factory job.
And that's true. And that doesn't just happen on manual labor, right?
Right.
If you go even from a corporate perspective, hiring corporate people, right? You get young people. They're very, very excited, right? But their expectation, because we didn't communicate it early on, is that they are doing strategic stuff,
Yes.
right? At an entry-level position.
Right.
Because that's how we're selling it. You can see it in how we do our position titles.
Right.
Executives.
Right.
Right? Executive assistants. So, must be very strategic.
Right.
But when they come in, then you give them the actual job, right? Which is prepare, for example, data.
Right.
Organize data. Those call for very specific skills and tedious jobs, right? And
Attention
that's
to
when
detail, dependability.
yes, and then they say, this is not what I signed up
Right.
for. I'm signing up for, position wherein I have my word matters, right? That I am a part of the decision-making process. Preparing Excel sheets doesn't contribute to the decision.
Do you think that that's an issue of that we're not doing a good enough job of positioning? Look, this job, the start of the job, is one that's got to be very heavily detail oriented, and you're putting together data sets that people are going to use to make the analysis. You yourself are going to be doing some analysis, but by and large, you're providing that input for other people. Later on in your career, there will be more opportunity for you to do that. But the first part of it is this. And so sometimes I think we miss to your point, we jump into talking about where you're going to be 3 jobs from now, but we forget to tell you about what your job is going to be like tomorrow.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if it's because I'm old, but
I'm old.
a plot I think that we drop, right, is that concept of, look, there's no shortcut in a career.
Right.
there's no matter what people say, there is no shortcut to
Right.
here, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is only steps, okay, that you'd have to go through in order to get to the next,
Right.
right? You could maybe shortchange that, but definitely you'll be a turnover on the next level because you'll be incompetent at that level.
Yeah, that's going back to the Peter principle
Yes,
all over
correct.
again.
Yep.
Right, right. So how do you, what are the things that you look at, or how do you analyze the turnover situation? Do you divide it into, new hire turnover, people who are leaving less than a year, or you do look at turnover by department, or turnover by function, or turnover by geography? I mean, how do you look at and pull data together that helps you analyze it?
Actually, for us, pulling data is complex, right? Because we're an organization that is both globally with different business units, with different natures of businesses, and there's no single statistics that fit, no single industry that fit, no single geography that fits, right?
Right.
But typically we collect the normal statistics on turnover, voluntary versus involuntary turnover, level turnover, right? But we also monitor 30, 60, 90-day turnovers.
Oh, okay.
Right?
All right.
And we link that up to programs that we do. Okay, just to give you an example, instead of taking those statistics and experiences, right, independently, we associate that, for example, with programs. So, for example, for every new section head and above manager, we have a new manager orientation journey, which is a 90-day onboarding journey.
Oh, okay.
But on that 90-day onboarding journey, the experience, right, okay, and the turnover and stay questions are built into their 30, 60, and 90-day onboarding learning journey.
Okay.
And such that we don't need to collect that separately statistically, right? We don't need to do that reactively, but we already receive feedback as they're going through the onboarding. And therefore, we would know who is the high risk.
Right.
Okay. So, for example, we found that there's a high correlation of people who turn over within the first 90 days and those who do not finish the new manager onboarding journey.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
And therefore, we push our global PNC and learning teams, make sure that you catch up, right? And you make sure that the experience for the new manager onboarding, okay, because the likelihood of them staying after 90 days goes significantly higher if they finish the 90-day onboarding journey.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Yeah, that's a good piece of insight. I think what that brings to my attention is not so much that we get enamored with the collection of the data, but it's how you learn from that and how you use that, and how you put the expectation on the hiring manager themselves to actually make sure that people are onboarded in an effective way.
Correct. And because then if we don't, what happens significantly is that the data collection becomes a process.
Yes.
And therefore, for the PNC, for the people and culture, right? Those that lead that function, what happens is it becomes for them an activity, right?
Correct. And then you become trapped in completing the activities.
It becomes a burden.
Right.
Why are we doing this?
Right.
But again, if you give them just the final score, this is our turnover rate for them. Sure. Okay. But that's the past, right?
Right.
That's what happened in the past. I cannot do anything about
it.
It is what it is.
It's like driving a car looking in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, correct. And I think that reactive versus proactive measurement, I think that is a point that is being missed by many of the analytic companies. Right? What we need are not really more things that would collect for a process at the end,
right?
But rather as it happens, right?
Right.
As it happens, how do we get involved there as it happens?
One of the things that someone shared with me some years ago, which I thought really made sense, is when you talk about the onboarding process, is a way in which you can help reduce turnover, and hadn't really thought of it myself that way. But as we were looking at it, we said, well, why don't we tell the new hire why we hired them?
Correct.
Why don't we share, if we believe our hiring process is turning out, credible information, because what we're trying to do in the hiring process is predict the future.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So if our prediction fails, then that's something we should know about it. But if we're confident that our prediction is accurate, then why don't we sit down and share that with the new hire, saying, look, the reason we hired you is because when we were looking at these competencies and these sets of skills, you had this and this and this and this.
Mm-hmm.
There are two areas, quite frankly, that we're not 100% sure of, but we felt you were strong enough that we decided to hire you anyway. But please pay attention to these two.
Yeah.
And if you need help with these, come and ask me about it, and I will keep an eye on it for you because we want you to succeed.
Correct.
That's why we hired you.
True. And I think that is the second equation, right? Besides the manager being effective managers, that I think it comes from, if I'm not mistaken, the minute manager, right?
Yes.
Do not ever assume that managers, right, are mind readers,
Right.
right? And I think that's important to reduce the turnover, that we actually communicate clearly to people what are the expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see, we're always talking about things like generational gap. But how do we know it's a generational gap instead of a communication gap, that we're
Right.
not defining our expectations well?
Right.
So, for example, we're always telling different generations, oh, you're not as professional as we are. But maybe the problem is not that they're not professional. It's the problem is that they have a different definition of professional.
Right.
For them, for example, professional might be, hey, your collar and haircut should be correct.
Right.
But to them, that's not professional.
Right.
But for them, professional is I'm on time,
Right.
right? So
Right.
we just have, maybe it's just a matter of defining the expectations and being clear from beginning to end of our expectations.
Right.
I can remember, for example, for us, with one situation for us that always comes about is the need for remote work.
Right.
Right? Everybody wants to work from home, and every asks, "Oh, is there work from home here?" And our answer is always no. Okay, and then, of course, when you say no, you have to explain why is it a no.
Right.
Then we explain, okay, this is the expectation. We are in the food hospitality business.
Right.
All of our employees frontline
Right.
do not work from home.
Right.
Rain or shine, COVID or not,
Right.
they are standing there facing customers.
Unless we could redirect our customers to your house.
Correct, right? And now you're going to tell us we support people, right? We are working from home. So when these people working at the location tell our customers, go to our back house, they won't see anybody there because we're all working from home. Doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
And therefore, you give that why. Now, if they can live with that why, then they're a fit. If they're not a fit, then they never will fit. And they will sooner or later be a turnover.
That's interesting. I mean, one of the things that I was taught years ago about selection is somebody explained it to me. Look, what we're trying to do in selection is ask three questions. Can they do the job? Will they do the job? Will they be motivated?
Correct.
And will they fit
Yep.
with the team and the culture of the company? So can do, will do, and fit. And yeah, it made a lot of sense to me. It was very simple. It's something I've never forgot. But, the selection process itself and the way in which we evaluate performance on an ongoing basis has to answer those three questions from the beginning of the journey to, the completion of the journey.
Right. And I think as people in culture and HR, right, we need to do our part to, break that cycle, right? That advertising cycle. Because we have a role there, right?
Right.
Because we want to get ahead. Therefore, we escalate that competition for talent
Right.
to the point of unrealistic, right? So we need to break that chain. It's the same. We cannot consider talent as a zero-sum game, right? We need to strike a balance together as people in culture and HR community. Because if we see it as a zero-sum game, we'll keep on escalating this until everybody gets to a point wherein we spoil the market.
Do you think that by putting more emphasis on the selection process itself and making sure that those involved in the selection process are, representative of your best and brightest, because if you're bringing candidates in, you want them to meet people that they will respect and want to be a part of that. They want to be a part of that team. I like those people. I met them. They're great. And if those things happen, does that help reduce turnover? Does it help with everybody's still talking about engagement? Are our managers creating engagement? And I sometimes worry that engagement now becomes another thing that we look at that says, what's our engagement score? Because if our engagement score is going down, we're going to have turnover.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you guys measure engagement, or how do you?
Yes, we do, right? So we have an annual engagement. Okay. And of course, all of the different experiences are measured in, right? But going back to your point on the hiring and then how it trickles down, because it's very true, right? It all starts with the hiring process.
Right.
Because once you get the hiring process right, turnover,
goes away. But
there will always be turnover,
right,
because there is part of turnover that needs to be there.
Right.
Right. But at least the unhealthy part of the turnover goes away.
Right.
Right. Engagement, doesn't have to be a big event, but rather just small, activities so that you get constant feedback. Right. But again, that hiring process is so critical, but that is seen as such a specialized field, which is for me incorrect. The hiring process should not be a specialized field. That should be an everybody field.
Right.
Because when you go into the hiring process, from the recruiter down to the interviewer, down to the decision maker of the hiring, right?
Right.
They should all be aligned. They should be measuring exactly the same thing.
Correct.
But that's not what is happening, right? The recruiter is basically managing the resume. Right? Does he have sufficient experience? Is he okay enough? Enough, not even exceptional, okay enough.
Right.
Then gives it to the interviewer. The interviewer measures it with, do you fit with me? Right? It's more a me fit, right?
Right.
Okay. And then basically the decision maker, the final one who signs off, is basically in limbo, right? He neither knows this person well enough. Right. Okay. He doesn't know the competence of this person, right? So there needs to be a framework that they share, a thread that they need to share, right? Okay. Otherwise, again, it's a specialist field, and then everybody's blindsided.
Everybody does their specialty, and nobody wins.
Yeah, correct. So it's not an integrated process, and I think we're missing that point. It needs to be an integrated process, and the integration is really a common thread, right?
Yeah, I've always felt that the hiring manager needs to be on the interviewing team, the face-to-face interviewing team, and 2 or 3 of their key deputies. And we had a session earlier, we were talking to a headhunter, and he was saying he thinks that companies that have more than 4 interviews are wasting their time.
Yeah.
That basically, if you've got 3 or 4 well-trained interviews, and they agree on what it is that they're looking for, and they go about it, and then they meet directly after the interview and they discuss the candidate and reach a consensus decision, that in and of itself reduces a lot of turnover.
Correct.
Gets rid of a lot of the extraneous reasons why people leave.
Correct. Right. Because there are certain things that you don't need to really discuss. So, for example, a person's resume shows you whether the person has sufficient skills in order to handle this, right? It's really, the conversation is really about the fit, the organizational fit, right? The fit in terms of, temperament, right? Competence fit, but experience, you don't need to ask them, it's there.
One of the things that I've seen the interviewers interviewing teams make a terrible mistake at is they get through their interviewing and they've interviewed 3 people and they can't quite make a decision because they didn't sit down together at the very beginning and totally agree on everything they were looking for. And so what happens is they default to the person with the most experience.
Correct.
Right. So they've got three candidates. One is 36 years old, one's 40 years old, one's 44 years old. And it's either going to be the 40-year-old or the 44-year-old that gets hired.
Yeah. Correct.
Because at the end of the day, they say, well, this one's got more experience. Let's go with him. But they had the opportunity right in front of them to collect all the information that they needed to really help them make a predictive decision.
Yep.
And so oftentimes that predicts the turnover, right? Because you make the mistake at the point of making the job offer to the wrong person.
Correct. And particularly for the early turnover, right?
Right.
That less than 6 months turnover, right? And of course, that changes in level, right? Because usually at the lower level of the hierarchy, right? When you're hiring people at the lower level, their risk of turning over on that first 6 months is of course always higher.
Right.
Because then, okay, if I don't fit, there's always more opportunities out there.
Right.
But for professionals at the higher managerial level, right, that first 6 months, okay, turnover, that is more uncommon. If people turn over at the managerial level at the 6 months period, there is really something wrong.
There's a problem.
There's a huge problem and it's visible.
Right.
Right. But you would say a covert reason, usually that happens after the honeymoon period.
Right.
Because 6 months is a honeymoon period. No manager is hired wherein they are hammered on the first 6 months.
Right.
First 6 months, typically not, right? And if they get hammered in the first 6 months, then you expect a turnover by the right?
That would be a pretty good predictor.
Oh, that would be a good predictor, right? Okay, and particularly, for example, if you have managerial meter executive meetings, right? And on your first 6 months, you're already in a heated argument with the committee, then turnovers at that level is predictable. For behavioral itself.
Pretty predictable.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah, this is an interesting discussion because it didn't go exactly as I was first thinking about it, because I was thinking everybody's going to be talking about data analytics, right? When we analyze this, we look at turnover by individual department, turnover by manager, turnover by function, but you come down to it and you say, look, employment is a relationship, and it's probably going to be the second most important relationship you have.
Correct.
And it is in fact a relationship. And if usually what happens, marriages, families, whatever else, when things go wonky, is because the relationship has failed. Somehow,
Yeah, correct. And I think in the future, data and analytics will still be important.
Oh, yeah.
Even more important. But I think currently the data that we have, okay, is not the data we need in order to get insights. Right? Because, for example, if you just talk about exit interviews are useless. Maybe stay interviews is a better idea. And if you have, more regular stay interviews, right? Then that might be better data for an AI, such that you can ask an AI, okay, based on my semantic conversations over 6 months, can you give me an analysis whether this person is high risk, low risk of a turnover, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I think if we change our mindset on what data we collect, and the data we collect is on why people will stay or will leave rather than why people left.
Right.
Because I think the question why people left is a useless data.
I agree.
Right. And therefore, no matter how advanced your AI and analytics generation, you'd still get garbage out of it.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And I think if we just shift that mindset, I think then we can go back to the conversation on turnover data and turnover analytics.
Right. Well, listen, I think this has been a fun conversation, but number two, I think it is you're bringing home the point that employee turnover is oftentimes the reasons are there in front of us. And it's not so much the system, the HRIS or whatever else, or applicant tracking system, whatever else, or whatever we're using, that's going to give us that information. it's the understanding between the manager and the individual. How's the relationship going? And
And that's another. If you ask me, that's another big topic on its own, right?
right,
Because that relationship.
right. Okay. Well, listen. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we reached the end of the first half hour.
Thanks, Tom. I
Okay.
enjoyed that conversation as
Good.
usual.
Me too. Me too. Always.